All right, so we'll get started. Yeah.
Hi, Anna.
Hi, a very good evening to everyone who has gathered here with us for our second webinar for the year. First of all, thank you for taking some time to register and joining with us today. I hope everyone is safe and in good health. In 2018, a millennial first generation entrepreneur with a passion to share premium Ceylon products with the rest of the world and to uplift the local community saw a closing down factory in Sri Lanka's coconut triangle. Seeing its value to be turned around as an authentic coconut supplier to the world with sustainability and ethical transparency at its core, he partnered with a coconut enthusiast and plantation owner to acquire the factory and build the export business Ceylon Exports and Trading Private Limited. He is none other than Mr. Dulara de Alwis. A pleasant evening to you.
Thank you very much.
We are extremely delighted to have you on board. So let's get started with the spotlight segment. The first question directed at you, Mr. De Alvis, is can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the business?
Sure. So I am the managing director and CEO of Ceylon Exports and Trading. So as a company, Ceylon Exports and Trading, we challenge the status quo in the global value chain whilst doubling down on authenticity. Essentially, we sell authentic, organic certified coconut products whilst ensuring a transparent and fair value chain. So although we started in 2018 by acquiring a factory that was closing down, we managed to grow it from what was a small LCL shipment business to now exporting to over 20 countries and exporting over several containers a month. So that's a brief introduction.
Yes. What about yourself? We need to know about you too.
Sure. So, what would you like to know about me? My background, how I got here, or
That's a third question, I would say. You need to talk about education, or maybe did you
sure,
pursue?
sure. So, well, I would. So I'm a person who is very passionate in um, business and investing. I've for the last ever since I've been in university, actually from school, university, I've always read into business, into financial markets, across industries. So there's always been a passion of mine. And so after school, I actually went to university in the US. I studied economics and mathematics. I actually did 1 year at the London School of Economics. I think that's where I met Kayashini. She was a LSE regional ambassador, I remember. So, and but I always had a an interest and a passion to want to integrate Sri Lanka with the rest of the world. And I always believed that much of the value that Sri Lanka can unlock will have to come from integrating better with the rest of the world, and that included obviously for me individual and for the community as a whole. So when once I returned to Sri Lanka, I initially worked at Unilever for a few years, but then when I saw this factory that was up for sale, I was in the middle of the drought. I was 2017, 2018, so it was a very tough patch for the coconut industry. So a lot of factories were closing down. I took a long-term view and a better risk, so to speak, that there is long-term prospects in this industry, and it's a very authentic Desia, so Kapruka, so to speak, product to Sri Lanka, and that's the reason why we went ahead with the acquisition. So at the time I didn't have the capital, the full capital. So I pitched to a set of investors. One of them really liked me. So there's a minority holding company called JYs, and instead of two cousins, they manage it, and they also come from a coconut plantation background. It just happened to be the case. So when I pitched them, they end actually in a range of businesses, experienced businessmen, poultry, but they also happen to have a coconut plantation. So they backed me, and obviously the first few years were very, very challenging. Whenever you're talking about a factory, you're talking about large, larger overheads. You're talking about managing people, a lot of workers, laborers, both management and obviously um, semi-skilled and unskilled. But we managed to over now a little over 3 years to go from what it was to now I entirely 95% export business and really selling across 20 countries, over 20 countries.
So that's quite a story, I would say, and I'm sure there's more to it, which you don't tell right now. But
It's a lot of
so,
questions.
yes, did you become an entrepreneur by choice or by chance?
Well, I knew I always wanted to be, um, and it's let's put it this way. I knew it was never the label that motivated me. Uh, I didn't just want to be an entrepreneur to say I was an entrepreneur. I genuinely wanted to um, add value, and I believed the best value that could have been added to the community was through entrepreneurship, especially in a country like Sri Lanka where there isn't enough entrepreneur rigor. So, and as I said before, given that I've always read and been very interested in business, so just to take a step back, before I got into business, I would also invest. So I was very involved in the equity markets and from a very very long term perspective. So I would read financial reports and look at how these companies might perform over 3, 5, 10 years, really long term perspective, and take smaller bets, obviously, right? So business and investing was always it was a passion I developed, and they really go hand in hand. And so when this opportunity came about, I felt intuitively it was something that I had to take. Obviously, it was a much larger risk. I mean, it was the largest risk I've taken compared to anything else I've done in the past. But so I wouldn't say it was by chance, but maybe. But there was definitely a lot of luck involved. I mean, there's always good karma and good luck, however where you want to put it.
Nice. So I think you always had that entrepreneurial vibe in your system. Maybe that's why, like, at point it came out and you wanted to do this change. So out of all the industries in Sri Lanka, why did you choose this specific coconut industry? Do you have a related background? Yeah, like I asked before.
So actually, I had no background in manufacturing. So that it was so that that's what I think came as a shock to an initial shock to a lot of people, at least people in my family and my close friends. What's this guy doing all of a sudden just getting into manufacturing? He has no. So I was you know as soon as I graduated, I worked at a bank in New York, but then I worked at Unilever. But I was in finance in Unilever, so most of my background was in really on the finance side from a career, from a learning economic standpoint. So manufacturing was something that I've really never been involved in directly in any sort of company before either, right? So it was a huge learning curve, and the reason I got in obviously was I saw a couple of things, right? One was the fact that there was a global tailwind towards coconut products. So there was a demand side push, right? So it was something that the global market was had an increase in demand. That was number one. The second one was I also saw that the younger generation was not getting into manufacturing overall, not just coconut manufacturing, but overall they were largely avoiding it, and not just in Sri Lanka but globally. So I'm someone who has always done look for areas that the rest of the community or the world doesn't do, but has still business prospects. It's a very fine line, right? You have to, it's not just about doing something different, but it has to still have business sense. But at the same time, if other people or the vast of the majority of your generation is avoiding it, that means there is a lot more opportunity there than there is. The third one was, um, you know, I wouldn't say that I saw this going into the business. Something that I saw once I got into the business was this in the business, how people who are in manufacturing aren't as good salespeople, aren't focusing as much on exports. All the people who are in exports and sales, they're not doing manufacturing, right? So there's, you know, this separate, like it's, you know, it's the case in Sri Lanka. You take tea, there are factories, then there's the auction, but then there are the exporters who just buy from the auction and they export, right? But you know, there are supply chain reasons for that, regulation for that. But even a lot of other industries, you take spices, you take coconut, you'd be surprised the number of, you know, manufacturer only businesses or export only businesses. So I saw it straight away as an opportunity to integrate both with, you know, sales side dynamism with understanding manufacturing, and that is not easy, you know, because with manufacturing you have a lot more of a mental requirement, because you know there's people to manage constantly. There is wastage to control. For example, once you get a batch of coconuts, you know, one batch of coconuts could be a few million rupees. So you know, and you're talking several batches. So even a 5% wastage can mean that, you know, you're running very inefficiently, and there's only so much you can sustain that before your company doesn't survive. So you have, so managing that as well as managing the export side, which is, you know, the relationships with clients, was something that I saw that really that many Sri Lankans weren't really doing. They were either choosing one of them, either the sales side or the manufacturing side. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. so, so can you differentiate between Coco House and Ceylon Exports and Trading? Are they two different businesses, or what is happening inside?
So Coco House is a brand, right? Ceylon Exports and Trading is the business. So initially, when we started off, right, you know, when we got in, I mean, still we're largely we pack for global brands, right? And so it's called OEM, Original Equipment Manufacturing, right? And we also supply to ingredient buyers as well, because some cosmetic buyers, they buy virgin coconut oil as part of the, you know, cosmetic application, or they might buy coconut milk in order to make a larger product on their end, right? So a lot of that business initially was OEM. But you know, one thing I saw in this journey was actually it's whole of Sri Lanka, where we have very little of the value of our authentic Sri Lankan Ceylon products, whether it be tea, whether it be spices, whether it be coconut products. Very little of that value has come upstream to Sri Lanka, and to the people who truly deserve it, which are the farmers, the processing community. And the reason for that was a failure to brand, right? And a failure to own these brands. So, you know, if you take Sri Lanka, you know, everyone's like, oh, wow, Ceylon tea, we are like, oh, Ceylon products are the greatest. But you go globally, I mean, how many Ceylon tea brands are there? I can name them with three fingers, right? So that's whilst the global multinational brands are keeping the lion's share of the margin, right? Whilst, you know, you see in Sri Lanka, you know, the plantation workers are every year on strike, you know, in poverty, right? So it was, you know, I saw it as a long-term model that's just unsustainable, right? So you know, I'm not the only one. There are other players who think that way as well. So that's where Coco House came in. So Coco House is the world's first tree to table global coconut brand. So, and we have a trademark for that. So what we are is that we provide unprecedented transparency. So anyone around the world who's buying a Coco House product knows, okay, it came from, you know, this factory, and in this factory these people were paid this much, and the farmers were paid, the farming community was paid this much, and it's come all the way, um, tree to table, all the way from the estate to the essentially the consumer's doorstep, or to their table, right? So, and as opposed to look, and then you take other coconut brands out there, they're all owned by multinationals. They don't know how much the farmers are getting paid, and they're just using multi-origin. They're using Indonesian products. They have no real loyalty to one country per se. So it was
I had to face some technical issue there. I'm really sorry about that. And did I interrupt your speaking?
No, I think I finished my answer. So yeah, so Coco House essentially, you know, it's about selling something authentic to Sri Lanka and doing it in an innovative way, whilst bringing more of the value to the community that truly deserve it, right? The farming and processing community. So and hence tree to table. So yeah, that's and Ceylon Exports and Trading is the company that does it.
That's the big name.
That's the company name. Yeah,
Yeah.
Coco House is the brand. It's a global brand.
Right. So you told about Coco House. That was my next question, but you told us about it. And I read this thing where it says the international brand is Coco House. What made you decide on this name, like to reach to the international levels?
Why did I choose the name of the brand? Is
Yeah,
that the
Coco.
question? Well, well, actually, I was just essentially thinking through names, a name that's easy for the year, um, easily memorable. It was not taken, right? So um, that was the reason why, and I saw, just to add one thing, we as a company, which is essentially we're on a new phase, we believe, where we also we're very keen on developing value-added products. So if you take a lot of coconut products that Sri Lankans might think of, it might be the general ones like the coconut milk, the flour, the coconut oils, but then there are also products that can be developed from that. For example, coconut cheese, coconut yogurt, and I felt this Coco House umbrella of a brand offered that opportunity, right? And so that's sort of really our next phase. So there's some R&D projects going on, right? So, but yeah, so Coco House, the name, it just it was not taken. I was just I was thinking of different names and decided to go with it.
Right. It's first time I heard about coconut cheese. Okay. So can you tell us about the challenges you faced when launching the business?
Sure. So, as I said before, I've never been in manufacturing, right? So, um, and neither did I have any export clients to start with. So, but then I had this factory, and I had, and people, workers there who had families, they were depending on it. So, essentially, I, jumped into the deep end, right? And so the challenges are plenty. I mean, I can go through thousands of them, but I'll take maybe a few that are the big ones. From a manufacturing side, me personally, I didn't go into it under knowing simple concepts such as manufacturing norms. For example, if there's an input in a process, in a manufacturing process, there's an output, and or set of outputs, or a set of inputs that lead to a set of outputs. So it's very important going in knowing, okay, what the inputs and outputs should be exactly, at least what the norm is in the industry, or what should be the norm, so that you can drive efficiency. I essentially, in the first, really, up till the first year and a half, there's certain machines that were worn off. I didn't know. So there was a lot of wastage. I was not getting the yield that I wanted, but I didn't even know, right? So there was, if I calculate, so, and that those are very important at the beginning, because if you're a new business, you should be very lean, right? You should try to save as much possible, so you have an opportunity to survive and get bigger. That took time. Obviously, I realized it afterwards, but that thinking mindset was something that I had to develop, which is this concept of norms, right? Manufacturing norms, very important if you're in manufacturing, input, output, right? The second one is just the fact that I started with 0 clients, right? So I spent, so, I spent probably a year and a half straight from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. just looking for clients and communicating with clients. In my initial periods of business, I probably sent in a day a max of 1,000 emails. I mean, so that was, it was very important, because in the business we're in, we are going for container orders, right? And one container is very high in value. For example, it could be a minimum of $20,000, $30,000, all the way up to $100,000. So your objective is, try to develop business that can bring you multiple containers. So even if you email 1,000 people, or let's say you email 100 people, but one person replies, that's all you really need. But you need to, communicate with 100 people to even have that opportunity to see. First you're learning, because the more you talk with clients, you understand the market, right? What they're looking for, okay, how you can tweak your pitch, maybe your product range or specification, or maybe your certification, whatever you're missing. And then once you win it, it's about delivering it, right? So that was the second one. The third one is, even though you win an order in this business, doesn't necessarily mean you have to deliver it, right? You have to deliver a quality product. And now when you're talking about a container, you're talking about, I remember in the first few months of the business, when we bought our first container, you're sending all of a sudden 30,000 glass jars in a container. Now you might have the product, for example, it's extra virgin coconut oil. The oil is perfect, the quantity is there, but your team pasted the label just crooked. The whole thing, they didn't pay the attention. So, those things happen because, so basically there are times where, I was actually, so I wasn't, maybe I wasn't at the factory every day, but then once the shipment has gone, there's been a lot of cartons where the labeling has been entirely either crooked, or there's been dirt on it, hasn't been done properly. So you can lose the client entirely, right? So this quality control aspect, for something as simple as applying the label properly. It could be a semi-automated process, it could be a manual process, but the point is the product needs to be 100%, right? So it's really, putting those quality control processes as well, right? So it's, I would say, that was definitely, it's still, we have a lot, we wouldn't be able to grow this far if we had constant quality issues, but it's always something where, we have a metric where we don't let more than 0.1% of a container have quality issues, right? That's our target, right? So, but it was a learning, right? So I would say those three were the biggest
challenges. And we wish you more strength to face the challenges you're yet to face. So this is about you now. What is your biggest strength and weakness, according to you, obviously?
Well, what's interesting is that over the years, my people who've known me have said that I'll be a good sales personality. I didn't realize the value until I got into business. I always knew. So I've learned, the communication. I always worked on communication in school, in university, both written and verbal, right? And I always couldn't speak English as confidently and as well, right? So I put myself out there. I did things like speech, Model United Nations, and for reading and writing, for writing, I read over the years, and I wrote. So I would say my strength over the years, what I've realized is really my sales skills, and that's something that is linked to communication. So that's something that's developed. In terms of That's one strength. I would say there's um, I don't know if this is another strength, but in terms of weaknesses, um, there are several. I mean, I could name plenty. I'm not the most structured, and manufacturing setting, and that was the reason why early in the business I faced a lot of issues in understanding norms and implementing norms, right? So that is important when you're running a business, to be organized, to be structured. That's one, right? The second one is managing people, right? So you know when you're, especially when you're a younger business person, this is man or woman, you may not have had as much leadership experiences, right? So now all of a sudden, you are
Thank
managing.
you again. Recording is there if you want to recap. Otherwise, I'll see you all back at tutorials.
Um,
Sorry, yeah. So yeah, so this so when you're running a business, you have to manage people, right? So and there are uh, in all different ages, genders, different situations financially. So I think this was something, people management. I was always a very I was always uh, decently social. I wasn't overly social, but really understanding people, empathizing with people was, on a personal level, at least on a leadership level in a company, was something that I had to that I was weak in. I would still say I'm weak. I would like to think I'm a bit better now, but something I've definitely had to work on.
right. So, can you tell us the business model that you have adopted? Is there any specific business model, or just uh, you just do it in a more professional way?
Uh, what do you mean by business model?
Like, you've set prices, the targets, and do you have anything related as such?
Uh,
And your how you set your prices, all this.
sure. Okay, right. Okay. So, right. So our OEM business, which is the original equipment manufacturing business, we use, we always try to understand our cost of manufacturing, our gross cost, essentially, from a P&L standpoint. We have to know that. So based on that is how we price the product, right? So our business entirely works that way, right? So cost of goods manufacturing, okay, what is the margin we need to keep on the business? So it's sustainable, overheads gets covered, and we can grow, right? So in terms of a business, that's essentially how we've largely run it. The brand business is a lot more interesting. The margins obviously larger, it's there's long-term stickiness, but there's also this marketing investment that has to be looked into, done strategically, can be very expensive, but as it's something that you have to think of in terms of a return on marketing investment as well, as something that you have to do over the long term if you want to build um, a global brand. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Okay, so have you got anything in store for the locals for us?
In terms of a product, or
Yeah, in terms of products. Yeah.
well, um, I would like to think I always have something in store for the locals, and at least the community. But in terms of a product range, as you know, the fact of the matter is, coconut products especially, but a lot of Sri Lankan products are um, premium by nature, right? So if you take coconut oil, it's one of the most, especially virgin coconut oil, it is the most expensive, one of the most expensive edible oils in the global market.
Mm.
Almost all other oils are cheaper. Palm oil is way cheaper, sunflower oil, corn oil, because they're built in scale. So a lot of the time, most of the products are just either not as affordable for most of Sri Lankans, or there is a higher premium in the global market, right?
Right.
And that just has to do with two reasons: the fact that Sri Lanka has a smaller population size, and also the per capita income is still small. What we want to do, I mean, as a country, is obviously increase everyone's per capita income, but the products we are selling, it's largely because of the premium nature of the supply chain. It makes sense to sell it to the world who can afford it better and will pay a premium for it, right? So in terms of focusing on the local, I mean, all our products are available for purchase locally. Although we don't spend too much time really marketing it, but something we're very excited about is other two uh, products that it's under development. It might take some time, which is this a coconut cheese range and a coconut yogurt range.
Okay. Right. So, what is the best selling product from the range, like which you export?
So our best selling product is extra virgin coconut.
Right. So there's like more demand in the global market.
Yeah. So the highest demand products, coconut derivative products, are extra virgin coconut oil and coconut milk. So those are the largest from in the edible category. But yes, so we do.
So, how is the competition between the olive oil manufacturing and coconut oil manufacturing? Like, is there any a big competition between them, or just because they're like different both in natures, obviously, but
Yeah.
you guys always compete with each other. So, have
So,
you?
so it's interesting. So people buy coconut oil, at least virgin coconut oil, for a different reason. So olive oil is unsaturated fats. Um, Coconut oil is saturated. People take coconut oil for MCT, medium chain triglycerides. There is no trans oil. It's very healthy, despite what some publication globally might be. Olive oil fits in a different category, right? And it's very much in the Mediterranean diet. It is also in the premium niche healthy space, but so is virgin coconut oil. So it doesn't, fortunately, it doesn't really split the buyer, right? The buyer who wants olive oil might also consume coconut oil or might not consume coconut oil at all. But it's not, we are not in that premium niche category. The people who are taking it for the health products, not really competing. But if you take it from if you take this on a commoditized product, for example, okay, for any cooking oil, then all cooking oils are in competition, but on the premium end, olive oil and coconut oil are in competition, right? So, but all in all, it is not big of a problem because the geographies that grow it are different. Olive oil is the Mediterranean, Southern Europe, Africa. Coconut, on the other hand, is mainly Asia, tropical climates. So Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Philippines, India, those are the largest players. So largely hasn't really been. I look at how olive oil is selling. It is a larger market than coconut oil is, virgin coconut oil, I should say. But I don't really see it as a direct
Rivalry.
competitor.
Yes. So resilient supply chains are key to business success. Could you tell me the challenges you had to overcome when building a resilient supply chain?
Sure. So, well, what happens in the coconut sector is that, year to year we go through coconut surpluses and shortages, but it's mainly been shortages over the last 5, even 10 years, right? So the coconut supply is dwindling. So this resilient supply chain for us, has a lot to do with maintaining the harvest where it is and hoping it grows. It's actually been degrowing, but that's one thing, right? So there's little we can do overnight, right, to overcome this. So, but we feel, two things are very important. One is um, just an actual, uh, a overall policy framework to see the value of coconut trees as a whole for the country, right? And then the second one, because the value it brings to the country, right? The economic, the generation, the value to society, exports, all of that together, right? The second one, which is also connected to the first one, is how can we bring a higher return to the planters, right? Because see, if there, in all these agri businesses, if the farmer was making tremendous amounts of money, they're not going to cut their coconut trees, right? People be looking to expand their coconut trees. So that our company views, my view is that the number one action we can take to build a resilient value chain in the coconut sector is to introduce a geographical indicator, GI. So the coconut triangle, right? For example, what are GIs, right? So there are several GIs around the world. For example, Manuka honey is a GI of New Zealand. Champagne is a GI of the Champagne in France, right? So you can only get it from there, and it comes with a tag, comes with the label of authenticity, of high value. And if you take the coconut triangle, it is one of the highest yielding coconut. It is the highest yielding area in the world for having, and especially for its nutritional and taste profile. So that the geographical indicator aspect is critical for demanding higher value globally, at least as an industry, right? And that will naturally bring a higher price to the farmer, right? So then that'll prop up the industry. The third one is the third one has to do with scale, right? We have to understand Sri Lanka is a small land-based country, right? And we can't grow everything, right? We should decide what we should grow and decide how to grow it, because there's a lot of limitations on expanding acreage, right? So coconuts, there's been laws in the past where a shareholder can only own 50 acres. You can't do 50. I mean, for example, if you're trying to do coconut estate, anything less than 30, 40 acres, you're most likely going to even lose money, because your cost of paying people and taking care of the soil, all that can be higher. So it's farming is all, at least coconut farming is something that you require acreages to grow. So that has that's is important for resiliency in my opinion. So that was the coconut side. When you say supply chain, it's everything. I mean, for example, us as an exporter, we also depend on packing material that comes from, not everything is made in Sri Lanka, right? And in a situation like this, where the country is in a debt crisis, there is insufficient dollars. We have, and there's a global shipping issue. We're not getting the packing material, right? So we can't now send the end product, so then it impacts our business. So the only, I mean, there's few, I mean, the things we can do to be resilient. We can plan ahead. We can find there's alternate ways of doing it, which is important. It's important to think of all of these, right, and try to have different solutions. It's almost impossible to nearly impossible, almost impossible to think of all the risks and all the possible solutions, but it helps to try to think as much as you can and have as many solutions as you can.
Right. What are the most important factors that lead to competitive advantage? Who do you think is your biggest competitor, or in that case, have you got any in Sri Lanka, or maybe globally?
Sure. So we are in we're in several categories, right? We're in the manufacturer exporter category. We're also in the global brands category in terms of competition. So for competitive advantage, look, I'll say the number one thing is, and this you don't get in an economic theory textbook, which is branding, and that is critical. It's something Sri Lanka isn't doing, and it's a long-term thing. You're not going to see the benefits in 2-3 days or 3 months, 6 months. It could be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. But that's why Dilma is who is. That's why English Tea Shop is who is. That's why Spa Salon are who they are. I mean, they've just built brands around their. When you think of Ayurveda, you think of a Vedamahatma, right? Now Spa Salon has taken Ayurveda and just like made it this exquisite thing, and people are spending 3,000 rupees for a little dumpy cosmetic oil, right? So, including Sri Lanka, you see Sri Lanka going and buying. So this competitive advantage, one of the ways for products and services, it could be services as well, but I'll speak from an agri-product standpoint, is to build brands. Now, the other ways are, just the look. I mean, a lot of people say digital, right? Is a trend, and to take, and it's especially in sectors that are a lot of young people that used to be in digital. They're grown up social media and they're constantly in social media, but there's still a surprising gap between these legacy industries such as manufacturing, agri based in Sri Lanka, and how they're integrated globally, at least from a digital standpoint. So and that is the case around the world. So there is, I believe there's a competitive advantage in understanding that. For example, we are number one on Google for coconut exporters in Sri Lanka, right? So I'm not saying that. I mean, they've just, it's because the other competitors haven't, I mean, obviously they've given us a headway. I mean, you're talking about companies that have been in the business for 10, 20, 30 years, right? 40, 50, even 100 years. Some of the oldest manufacturing companies, they just haven't focused on that, right? So given that the current trend for people sourcing products are digital, if someone goes, let's say there's a buyer in, let's say Europe, they're looking to source a coconut product, they go on Google, we come on top, right? So that's, it's an advantage we've built, right? So that's the second one. And I think, it's so, yeah. So those are two. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your
Yeah,
question.
sure it does. Okay, so we all know coconut lands are dwindling due to fragmentation and selling off lands for residential purposes. What advice would you give to coconut growers?
um,
Would you want to give an advice to the coconut growers?
yeah, I mean, I would look. I think, I would, yeah, I would definitely. I think you have to give it as in a holistic answer, right? Where it has to be. I think the whole industry has to be involved, but because a small farmer, might not be able to make a huge difference because they are thinking, they might have cost constraints and all of that, right? We have to understand that, right? One thing is, which is very important for the industry, is try to find as many agri-tech solutions as possible to increase productivity, right? So, what are some examples, right? There is around the world more and more technology being developed for drip irrigation, where you can put pipes under the estates. I haven't done as in-depth research into it. There are costs been, some of it is very costly, but those costs change. I mean, there are people that do it now. There are people that put pipes all around the estates. But then there are a lot of the coconut estates in Sri Lanka don't have an irrigation system. They don't have pipes. So what happens is, in a year where there is low rainfall, they get a huge reduction in crop. That impacts them, impacts the exporting industry, impacts the country, right? So there are simple concepts that everyone can adopt, but I think there needs to be an education aspect as well. You can't just entirely, blame them, but I think that needs to be there needs to be a holistic framework. That's within productivity, that's one. There's other things such as you know um, intercropping, right? Intercropping is, so basically, if you look at a lot of the research, especially in the Coconut Research Institute, you shouldn't just grow coconuts. You have to grow other things in between, right? From year 1 to year 3, you have to grow some fruits, and then you can grow cinnamon. Only if you intercrop will you get a higher return on your land, right? So and look, it's easy for me to just say these high level, but the fact is, ground level is these people might be lacking labor, lacking all this stuff, and they're like, their children are, they want to go work in Colombo in a bank, right? But this is that's why it needs to be thought of sort of at really a macro level. Everyone needs to be in on it, whatever the game plan that is, um needs to be in on it. So those are just two of the things that
Coconut is an agriculture crop almost, no? But what is the most important soil, water, quality of saplings according to you?
well, number one is water. So it requires a lot of, I forget the number, I think 10 liters a day, a very high amount. So it's water. Other aspects matter, soil matters, so NPK, the usual stuff matters, but not as NPK, the value it is for a crop like tea is 5, is for coconut. For coconut is mainly water. So water is number one.
Yeah, so if you could rank them, like water comes first, second comes soil. If you could rank them, soil.
Yeah, so what are the water, soil? What's the other one?
Quality of saplings.
Quality of?
Saplings.
Quality of saplings. Huh. Okay. So look, well, I can only answer with the sapling base being the same. For example, if the species is the same, you're assuming the quality of, there's 10 saplings in the same species, you'd hope that they're both of the same quality. Then it'll be water first, and then the soil. But that's interesting as well, because the species has a role to play, right? And when you're in the industry, there are, we look at it in many different ways. For example, for coconut manufacturing, we can't take the coconuts that are grown in the east. We can, but it leads to a lot of wastage. But that coconut is good for household consumption. Close to 70% of the coconuts that are grown in Sri Lanka goes to household consumption. So there needs to be coconuts for that too. What the manufacturing industry, what we like is the older one. We call it the tall coconut tree. The newer ones, like the dwarf and all, the coconut that comes from that species has more water than the kernel. So what we want is the kernel, the white kernel, right? So so in terms of the species, I think overall, based on CRI research, to go on what the experts present, that I personally wouldn't be the best one for that. I just know that if you're taking the species as the same, water is number one, and then soil.
Okay, so how difficult was it to penetrate to the export market?
That's a relative question, I guess.
Yeah,
well, it's yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say it's easy, nor would I say it's extremely challenging. I think it has to do with the mindset and approach, right? It's about learning. It's about your ambition. For example, I think everyone here have done exams. They've gotten good grades. They've come to this. It's about, okay, for example, some of you are like, look, I really want to pass this. You guys find a way to pass this. If you take finding an export client as important as that. If you take that sort of focus, you will figure out a way, right? How you'll figure out a way. How do I win export orders, right? So for me personally, I didn't keep a plan B. I knew that this was what I wanted, and I enjoyed it. Obviously, I enjoyed finding export clients. Yeah.
Okay, so this question is very personal. Like I wanted to ask, like when you said that you emailed 1,000 people on like one day, when you first started, did you have this mind that you had to export, or just wanted to target the local market at that time?
Yes. So that's a good question. So one thing is very important to understand is that Sri Lanka has 22 million people, right? And the Sri Lanka per capita income is around $3,800 per year. You take the world, that's more than 7.5 billion people. You take the US, you're talking 330 million people. You talk UK, that's about 80, 90. About China, 1.4 billion. So the fact of the matter is, most of the consuming population is outside of Sri Lanka, right? That's number one. Number two is that the world per capita income is $11,000. In countries like UK, it's around $40,000. So while Sri Lanka is at 3,800. So what that just means is that the opportunity, your return on effort, this is not even has to do with your cost or your fears, it's just return on effort. It is, easier actually, right? It is easier to find more buyers outside of Sri Lanka than in Sri Lanka, right? Because in Sri Lanka, and also if you take a set of products like coconut products of extra virgin coconut oil, I have to sell it to these people in Colombo and these little small towns. I can't, most of Sri Lanka won't be able to afford extra virgin coconut oil, right? So, that's something that is important to realize. So I knew that, right? I knew the market was outside, right? Was in the world. So it was about, okay, now what can I do to try to win a piece of that market?
Right. So there must be different teams handling different responsibilities. Can you name some of them? At least two of them.
Sure. Yeah. So we have, we have all the, I would say we have all the pillars of a company, especially a manufacturing company, manufacturing exporting company. So we have repair maintenance, right? We have production, we have accounting, we have export logistics, more from a documentation standpoint. We have operations, we have quality assurance, and then there's obviously sales, which is largely under me. But so those are.
So each team is interdependent on one another. However, according to you, what is the most important team? Like, if there is a breakdown in one team, which team could affect the whole system, the whole procedure?
Well, number one is always, well, look, I don't like picking one. I think, look, everyone's value is critical, right? Everyone's value is critical. And that's something, and to be honest, even me, I think in my business, I'm just, I think of myself as just, someone is just, largely, doing directionally whilst my team is, doing everything, right? They're executing, right? So if, for example, our factory manager, our factory team doesn't do the production in a timely fashion, in an efficient fashion, we won't have a business. If our accountant doesn't make sure he implements, controls and checks and balances and maintain, cash balances, etc., and do financial reporting in time, we won't be able to run the business. We'd be lost by now. If our export logistics team isn't, getting the documentation in time, making sure, the vessels are booked, so that we can actually ship the goods, we won't have a business, right? So Especially if the repair maintenance team isn't ready to fix repairs, machinery that constantly break down when you're in manufacturing, you won't be able to run a business. So so that's something I'm very proud about, which is our team. But so I would say, yeah, but from an for an entrepreneur, for a businessman, businesswoman, a critical aspect is sales, right? The number one aspect is sales. I mean, you know, the just because a lot of these other ones, you can get another opportunity to fix it. For example, if there was an accounting error, if there was a supply chain error, if there's delay. But if your sales isn't constantly recurring, if you're not constantly churning and maintaining current business, getting new business, the you won't be able to, all these other pillars, they break down, right? Also the other pillars won't be able to show their colors, right? Some people are they're great manufacturing people, right? Some people, they're great accountants. So if they're not in a framework where the sales, let's say the CEO, if in my case I do most of, let's say, a sales team isn't as dynamic and driving business, then it won't help. So I think for any entrepreneur, I think number one thing is, if let's say they're not good at sales, but to find someone who will, from the get-go, to find an individual who'll be good at it, right? And or you yourself do it, right? So it's generally an advantage for a business owner to also be very, who enjoys sales and can perform well in it.
All right, so last question from my end. Have you reached where you wanted to? Do you get the self-satisfaction? Okay, I'm here right now.
Well, to be honest, well, not. I mean, I love what I do. I mean, I've never been happier. I mean, I think the fact that I'm in business, I enjoy the process. It's not. I don't think it's for everyone. It's from morning till evening, weekends. I mean, all the time. You're just generally thinking about business. You can't not, because there's so much risk and unturned potential. But when I got into business, my ambitions were much larger, right? So I'm happy with the process. I'm not overly anxious about getting it, but I'm not happy with it. I mean, it's a work in progress. It's a painting that I believe can be improved significantly.
I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, we are officially done with the spotlight segment. Now it is a time for a quick and a short Q&A session. If you do have any, you can simply unmute yourself or drop the question in the chat box. You can even turn on your video upon your wish. So over to you.
Sorry, Rihanna, am I meant to choose from the questions on the list and answer them, or?
Okay, so there's this one question in the chat box. Okay, it accidentally has sent privately to me. Who is your role model?
Right. So, well, to be honest, I love reading biographies of business people. Ones who have actually might not be alive, and the ones who are alive. And I don't hold one particular person per se, but I've learned a lot from their journeys, and local and global, right? From people like the Warren Buffett, Sam Walton, even some of the stories of people here locally, the top businessmen like Namika Perez, all of them. So even small entrepreneurs. There are the founder of Chobani, who's this yogurt brand, a Greek yogurt brand. So I mean, I've that there's no one particular person, but I've always enjoyed reading about. So actually, there's one book I read recently, and I really recommend it to everyone. It's called Shoe Dog. The founder of it's by the founder of Nike, and it was a marvelous book. So and yeah, so yeah, that's the answer.
Any more question, guys? I know I've asked so many questions and Dular has answered so many, but if you do have any, you can always ask.
Hi, Dulara. Just have one small question. So yeah, so when you were sort of, when you were working at Unilevers and all of that, were you sort of looking to purchase a factory, or did you just sort of, stumble upon this on a newspaper and then, thought to yourself, okay, I'm gonna sort of leave my job and then take this up and grow and all of it, or were you looking for a coconut factory per se, or were you just, what sort of got you into this?
Sure. So Lakshman, it's the former, right? So you know, as I said before, I've always been very much interested and passionate in business and investing, right? So I was at that period in time looking at what was available. So I think I found it on a website. I think a website, a Sri Lankan website that had businesses up for sale, and so when I saw it, I obviously did more research into it, right? Onto the prospects, the actual factory itself, what the prior owners have done, all that. So yeah, I mean that's essentially how I got into. So I was constantly so it wasn't I would say I just saw it. I was very actively looking, and but I wasn't specifically looking for coconut. I just saw it and I thought it was a great opportunity. The more I researched into it.
Okay, yeah, got it. Thank you, Dulara.
So I got a question from Ayeshma, I believe. No, Ayeshmant. How did you make a convincing pitch to investors that you had the skills to make a dwindling factory profitable, given that you had no experience in manufacturing? Yeah, I think that's that is a great question. So well, I made a deck essentially, right, where I thought I mean, it's about the you have to there's some research into it. Okay, what was the capacity of the factory? How much volume can it generate? How much can you sell it at? What was the previous when the factory was running before, what were the margins they were keeping? um, Obviously based on all of that, and based on what I saw as a long-term opportunity to further develop this company, I built a pitch, right? And I pitched. So not everyone said yes. Actually, fortunately for me, I think this is not the case for everyone. I only ended up pitching to about 3 people, and 2 of them just didn't want to get into coconut. They believed it was this commoditized industry, all of that, no value in it, all that. But this, so when I was introduced to my current partner now, Altaf, he really, so when he, I don't know, when he met me, when he saw my presentation, the way I approached it, he was confident enough to invest in it. And obviously he knew I've never been in manufacturing. And so yes, so I don't know if that answered your question, Ashman. Great. Thank you.
So I think we could end the Q&A session. Do we have questions, Dulara? Or can we end the Q&A session?
Someone asked an hour ago, what are your main importing items? It's really packaging material, mainly because coconut starch is available locally. It's made, packaging material we import directly or indirectly through other suppliers.
Is there any more questions? Are there any more questions?
I think that is it.
Right. So yeah, so I know I asked so many questions, and I'm sure like most of them won't have questions because I asked almost everything. But I must say it was a quite interesting session. And we have come to the end of our webinar. And Dulara, what is one last thing you would want to say to the audience?
Rihanna, if you don't mind, what is the background of the audience? Are they in a program that I had no idea what Minkash and
Yes. So registrations were open to everyone. So
Okay.
basically, we have all sorts of backgrounds here, but mainly business management, more into business management.
Okay, so they're in the final year, or is there such a thing, or what is the
No, it could be anything. I
across the
mean,
board?
different couple of years.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, so I just think that if there are those that are very passionate in business, in entrepreneurship, it's almost it's for individuals for who in many ways are eccentric, right? That are not necessarily like the majority of the people, or don't feel that way, and is able to take constant criticism and failures, right? So and if you're able to sort of especially in a culture like in Sri Lanka, where a lot of it, if you take the vast majority of the country, everyone promotes the government as the place of employment. So to create a very entrepreneurial culture seems like the antithesis. But it's for younger people, I feel, because they're in an environment like that, it's a matter of having the self drive to want to to not just be different, but know that it'll add value. Like it has to be sort of ingrained in your passion, your purpose. That is more than just making money, right? Just profit, because there needs to be something that drives you, right? And it's always stronger if the reason you're getting into entrepreneurship is to change the world in some way, to change maybe a community's life, or to build this great product that will change people's lives, or a service. So that is what I'd share.
Right. Okay, so now it's like the most important thing, a group pitch, everyone, like a screenshot, I would say. Right, so Anbu, can you just notify us when you're done with talking, or just give us a countdown? Turn on your videos, everyone.
Yeah, okay, next.
You took?
Yeah.
Okay, that was fast. Right. Okay, so right. Yes. Yeah. So Anbu has dropped this feedback form link on today's webinar. So please do fill it. And yeah, thank you in advance for that. All right, as we wind up the second webinar for the year successfully, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Dulara de Alwis for accepting our invitation and being with us today. Your presence actually gives my committee, the audience, and I the motivation we need because it feels amazing to see young Sri Lankan energies reaching heights. Thank you, Ms. Gayashini, for making this possible. Last but not the least, the audience, thank you very much once again. Till we meet again virtually, stay safe, everyone, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.